You thought the worst was over. You thought the silence was finally clearing. But just when your heart began to hope again, something shifted. Suddenly he pulls back. He gets colder. He becomes silent again, not with peace, but with pressure. And you feel it, not in your mind, but in your chest, in your breath, in that ache that says, why now? After everything? This is the final test. But it's not just his, it's yours too. Because when the divine masculine is tested by the universe, he doesn't always rise with grace. He resists, he runs, he breaks what's trying to heal. And in that resistance, the divine feminine is forced to face the pain of being blamed for his delay. Can you feel that moment? Where his avoidance feels like your rejection, where his silence feels like betrayal, where the universe feels like it's punishing you for loving him too deeply. But listen closely now. This isn't your punishment, it's your prophecy, because what he cannot do, what he fears to do, you will. You will hold the light he keeps dropping. You will cross the threshold alone if you must. You will surrender the outcome and still rise. This test isn't asking you to save him, it's asking you to save yourself. And if it hurts, it's because the energy is breaking every old pattern that told you that love must be earned through waiting. No more. Because when the divine feminine stops carrying his burden, she begins carrying her crown. And the final test becomes her final liberation. She's always carried him, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. From the beginning of this journey, it was her devotion, not his presence, that kept the bond alive. It was her prayers, her light, her unconditional forgiveness, her willingness to hold love through silence, through delay, through absence. She was the keeper of the fire, even when he walked away from the flame. But now, something has shifted. She's tired, not in the body, in the soul. She's exhausted from the loops, the false starts, the moments of hope that dissolve into more silence. And so, without rage, without collapse, she simply begins to put it down. Not the love, the weight. She's no longer willing to carry the connection alone. And this is when the final test begins. Because the moment the divine feminine stops holding the energetic thread for both, the masculine is left to feel the full weight of what he's ignored, denied, or delayed. And it burns. You may think he doesn't feel it, that your silence means nothing, that your release goes unnoticed. But his soul feels everything. The field that was once filled with your energy, your protection, your spiritual covering, your soft light, begins to empty. And for the first time, he must face what it means to be disconnected from her, not because she left, but because she finally let go. Have you ever felt guilty for stepping back, even when it was hurting you to stay? This is the paradox of the final test. As she begins to rise, he begins to unravel, not out of punishment, out of reflection. Because her surrender isn't a rejection, it's a mirror. It shows him what he's been avoiding in himself. Her absence becomes his initiation. Her silence becomes his awakening. Her detachment becomes the space where he meets his own soul. But here's the truth most don't want to say out loud. Before he rises, he may collapse. Before he steps in, he may lash out. Before he owns his path, he may punish the feminine with more silence, more distance, more confusion. Not because she deserves it, but because his ego doesn't know how to lose control without projecting the pain onto her. And this is where her final test emerges. Will she absorb the guilt for his delay? Will she try to hold him again, just to stop his suffering? Will she mistake his confusion for a call to lower her frequency? Or will she keep walking even as he falls behind? This is not an easy moment. It's brutal in its beauty, because the love is still there. The bond is still real. But the role has changed. She is no longer the one who holds him. She holds herself now. And from this new position, she watches the universe begin to apply pressure to him, not through her love, but through her absence. And yes, it hurts as it feels like betrayal, and it may feel like the masculine is punishing her one last time, but really, he's projecting his own collapse onto her stillness. Can you see the difference? He may think she gave up. He may tell himself stories to justify his retreat. But deep down, he knows. She didn't abandon him. She stopped abandoning herself. And that shift breaks the illusion that she was always going to be there, no matter what. He starts to feel what she felt, the ache of silence, the chaos of uncertainty, the longing for a connection that feels close, but is suddenly unreachable. And it's in that ache, that reversal, that his awakening begins. But only if she stays true to the path. Because if she turns back to rescue him now, if she lowers her light just to soothe his unhealed wounds again, if she re-enters the loop out of guilt or nostalgia, then the test resets, the pattern recycles, and she becomes a participant in her own punishment. So the real question is, can she hold her frequency even when he doesn't meet her there? Can she trust the pain, not as punishment, but as purification? Can she let go of being the savior and rise as the sovereign? This is the moment where the timelines split, where she no longer carries him, where he must face the weight of what he avoided, and where she finally sees that letting go wasn't the end of love, it was the beginning of alignment. Why his awakening can feel like abandonment. There's something profoundly painful about watching someone awaken without you. The divine feminine often imagines his awakening as a moment of reunion, a moment when he sees clearly, returns fully, loves loudly. But that's not how awakening always begins. Sometimes his awakening starts with more silence, more retreat, more confusion, more distance, and for her, it feels like abandonment all over again. But it's not abandonment, it's activation, one that terrifies him. You see, the divine masculine isn't just waking up to her, he's waking up to everything he's suppressed, the wounds, the shame, the guilt of not showing up, the fear of failing again. And when the pain starts rising, his instinct is to run, not from her, but from himself. Can you recognize that moment when his distance felt personal, but it wasn't? When he pulled back and your heart whispered, "What did I do wrong?" But the truth is, you didn't do anything. His awakening doesn't follow the logic of romance. It follows the unraveling of illusion. And that unraveling is messy. To awaken, he must face the version of himself that broke her heart. He must face the echo of her tears, the memory of her devotion, the reflection of what he couldn't hold. That's not easy. That's not graceful. That's soul surgery. And in that moment, the feminine often misreads his silence as punishment. She sees his retreat and feels rejected. She hears nothing and assumes everything has failed. But what if his distance is proof that her energy reached him? What if he's silent because everything inside him is screaming? This is the paradox. The more he feels her light, the more he becomes aware of his own shadows. The more she anchors in truth, the more his illusions begin to shake. And so he pulls back, not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't yet know how to care the way she deserves. That knowing crushes him. Have you ever been so bright that someone couldn't look at you without flinching? That's what her energy becomes in his awakening, not a threat, but a truth too intense to face without first collapsing. And that collapse often looks like avoidance, withdrawal, disconnection. But beneath the silence, something is stirring. He's questioning himself. He's reviewing the past. He's starting to see where he ran, where he lied, where he hid. And while she may be grieving what seems like another goodbye, he is being haunted by what he didn't say when he had the chance. He's not just missing her. He's realizing that her love was always safe, and he was the one who didn't feel worthy of it. But here's where it gets even more painful for her. He might not come forward immediately. He might need more time, and in that time, the feminine may feel like she's being punished for his delays. She might ask herself, why does it always hurt more when he's waking up? Why does his healing feel like another heartbreak for me? The answer is layered, because energetically, when he awakens, the bond shifts. The energy she once held alone starts to rearrange. What was once hers to carry is now being mirrored back, and that mirroring burns, not just for him, but for her, because now she sees herself more clearly too. She sees where she overgave. She sees where she clung to potential. She sees where she called waiting loyalty, but it was really fear of letting go. And in this shared ache, both are being refined. But they're doing it apart. Not because love is gone, but because the healing had to happen alone. It's hard. It's confusing. It's sacred. And it's real. The feminine is not being punished. She's being purified. She's being prepared to receive love without condition, including from herself. And he's being taught how to show up in love without collapsing, how to give without guilt, how to choose her without losing himself. Can you hold that truth, even when it hurts, even when it doesn't look like progress? Because the final test of this journey is learning to trust the silence as part of the return, not the end of it. The masculine's awakening will never look like the movies. It may never come with flowers or grand speeches, but it will come with truth. And when it does, you'll know it wasn't abandonment. It was alignment, disguised as distance. How the universe tests her. Through his silence. The silence isn't random, it isn't cruelty, and it isn't coincidence. It's a spiritual mirror, a sacred echo, a test, not from him, but from the universe itself. The divine feminine has always felt the weight of his silence more deeply than she admits, not because she's weak, but because she's open, because she feels before she analyzes, because she receives before she protects. And that openness, that vulnerability, that radiant sensitivity, it makes her the perfect vessel for divine love. But it also makes her the one the universe tests first, because she is the leader of energy, the frequency holder, the mirror, the alchemist. And that means when the masculine goes quiet, the test isn't just, can you handle his silence? It's, can you hear your own voice louder than the void he leaves behind? When he disconnects, the universe watches to see, will you collapse inward or expand beyond? Will you internalize the silence or step deeper into your light? Will you try to rescue him or finally rescue yourself? These are not gentle questions. They cut, they confront, they shake her in the middle of the night when her soul is still waiting for a message that won't come. Have you ever felt like your heart was being asked to stay open while being torn apart? That is the test, not of devotion, but of sovereignty. Because silence for the feminine has always been the place where she gives her power away, where she wonders, what did I do wrong? Where she dims herself to not be too much, where she softens her boundaries just to feel close to someone who isn't reaching back. But what if the silence wasn't punishment? What if it was sacred space? What if the void is where her next version is born? Because here's the truth. When the masculine goes silent, his soul is not gone. It's listening. It's watching how she holds herself in the absence. It's feeling whether her energy remains centered or whether it fragments again to find him. And the universe? It amplifies the silence to show her the places within that still ache for external validation. It stretches the pause to reveal where she still performs for love instead of becoming it. It delays the message to ask, can you hold your truth without proof? Can you stay in your light when no one is watching? Can you believe in your path even when it looks empty? These are the tests that shape queens, and they are brutal in their beauty. The silence becomes a teacher, and she becomes the student, not of him, but of herself. She learns to soothe her nervous system without the apology. She learns to find wholeness without the reply. She learns to hear her own voice echoing back to her through the void. And when she does, something shifts in the field. Because he feels it, he may not have the words. He may not understand why his chest gets tight when she lets go. But his soul feels the severing of her energy, not in bitterness, but in evolution. And in that moment, he begins his test. Because now, the silence belongs to him. And she walks through it, not as a woman abandoned, but as a woman ascending. Have you felt this threshold? The moment when reaching out feels like betrayal, not to him, but to yourself? That's how you know you're passing the test. Not by holding the bond, but by holding your alignment. Because the feminine was never meant to carry the connection on her back. She was meant to embody it, and let that embodiment magnetize truth. So now the silence isn't empty. It's full of her power, full of her presence, full of everything she once gave away too easily. And when she fills that silence with herself, the universe doesn't just take note, it responds. The realignment begins. The shift starts to ripple. And what was once a wound becomes wisdom. There was a time when she needed to be chosen to feel worthy, when she waited on every sign, when she wept into her pillow after another unanswered prayer. She thought the pain meant something was broken, that his silence meant she wasn't enough, that if she just loved harder, softer, more patiently, he would return. But that version of her is dissolving, and in her place, a new feminine is rising. Not louder, not colder, not unreachable, just wise. The journey didn't harden her. It hollowed her, emptied her of illusions, carved out the codependent need to be saved. And now, she doesn't seek reunion from a place of lack. She no longer waits for him to validate what her soul already knows, because the pain didn't destroy her. It trained her to listen deeper, to trust earlier, to recognize her own patterns. Even when it hurts, she's not here to beg for union. She's here to embody it. That's her new role, not the one who chases the divine masculine, but the one who anchors the frequency of divine love itself. Can you feel that shift in yourself? The ache that used to define you now feels like a distant echo. The dreams that used to leave you shaken now feel like messages, not attachments. The memories no longer stab, they teach. You're not trying to be the one anymore. You are the one, for yourself, for your mission, for this timeline. And in this energy, the entire field around you changes. Because when a woman steps into her sovereignty, the old games dissolve. The dynamics collapse. The wounds stop running the show. She stops trying to prove that she's worthy of being kept. She keeps herself. And from this place, this grounded, radiant, unapologetic center, she becomes magnetic. Not through effort, but through embodiment. This is where the masculine begins to feel the shift. He may not know why your name keeps echoing in his mind, why your energy feels different, why his soul feels something he can't find words for, but he feels it. Not the needy version of you, not the overgiver, not the one who waited. He feels the queen, the priestess, the woman who loved him so much she was willing to let go and love herself more. Have you noticed how your silence no longer feels empty, but sovereign? How your boundaries feel more like blessings than barriers? How your love flows but no longer leaks? That's not coincidence, that's wisdom. Because the feminine isn't here to suffer, she's here to awaken. And once awakened, her very presence becomes the initiation. The masculine's awakening no longer depends on her sacrifice. It depends on her alignment. And when she stops bleeding to keep the bond alive, he must meet her in truth, or be left behind in illusion. And this is not cruelty. This is spiritual law. A queen doesn't chase, she radiates. She remembers who she is even in the silence, especially in the silence. And in doing so, she becomes untouchable, not because she's cold, but because she's finally whole. Do you feel that becoming within you? That part of you that no longer waits, but creates, that version of you that no longer fears being alone because you're no longer lonely in your own presence? That's her. That's the wise woman within. The version of you who sees the long arc of this journey and chooses peace over performance, alignment over attachment. This is your new role. Not to carry the pain, but to transmute it. Not to wait for love, but to become it. Not to shrink for union, but to expand into truth. And from this place, everything you thought you had to fight for will begin to find you. There comes a moment in every divine feminine's journey where it feels like too much. Too many signs, too much silence, too much waiting without answers. And she looks up to the sky, to the stars, to her guides, and whispers, "Why me?" Why did she have to awaken first? Why was she the one who felt everything so deeply? Why did her heart have to carry the ache of a love that never seemed to arrive fully formed? But the answer never comes in words. It comes in remembrance. It comes in energy. It comes in the slow, quiet understanding that this path was never a punishment. It was a prophecy. She wasn't chosen because she was weak. She was chosen because her soul was forged for this kind of fire. Because while others numb, she transforms. While others avoid, she alchemizes. While others collapse, she rises. This isn't karma. This is her coronation. Can you feel the difference? You're not stuck. You're sacred. You're not being tested to break, and you're being tempered to become. What if this ache in your chest wasn't evidence of being abandoned, but the activation of something ancient? What if the silence wasn't his rejection, but the universe tuning you to a frequency only you could hold? What if every moment you thought you were being denied was actually a divine delay to place you exactly where your light would rise the strongest? Because here's the truth that only the awakened feminine can hold. You were never meant to be rescued. You were meant to remember your divinity while no one clapped for it. You were meant to walk into the storm and become the calm. You were meant to feel your heart shatter and then bless every broken piece. This pain isn't your fault. But this path, it's your birthright. You carry codes in your body that the masculine hasn't yet learned to access. You feel timelines before they arrive. You love in dimensions most people can't even name. That's not a burden. That's sacred design. And yes, sometimes it feels unfair. Sometimes it feels like love passed you by. Like the person you were born for chose fear over you again. But look deeper. Every moment he retreated, you stepped closer to your own center. Every silence became a doorway into your intuition. Every goodbye birthed a new version of you that didn't need anyone's permission to shine. Can you see that now? You're not waiting. You're preparing. You're not being left behind. You're being lifted beyond. Because your light is not dependent on his recognition. Your mission is not on pause until he understands it. Your magic does not require proof to exist. And yet, your love remains. But now it's sovereign. Now it's rooted. Now it's radiant without reaching. This is the prophecy that the divine feminine would awaken first, that she would grieve the old world while building the new, that she would hold the light steady until he could see himself in it. You're not here to suffer, you're here to remember. And when you do, the entire field around you shifts. Because your frequency is the key. Your embodiment is the map. And your silence, the one that no longer begs, no longer breaks, no longer bends, is the most powerful sound in the cosmos. It says, I am the prophecy fulfilled. I am not waiting. I am arriving. So if you've been asking, why does this hurt so much? Know this, you're not being punished. You're being positioned, not for scraps, but for sacred union. Not for almosts, but for alignment. Not for delay, but for destiny. And you, brave, soft, luminous woman, you are already standing at the threshold of everything your soul came here to claim. There comes a point in the divine feminine's journey where the question is no longer, will he come back? But rather, will I keep rising even if he doesn't? It's the moment her soul stops negotiating with destiny. It's when she stops waiting for permission to heal. It's when she finally stops pressing pause on her evolution, just in case he wakes up. And in that moment, something breaks, not in a painful way, but like a cocoon splitting open. The part of her that lived in longing, in loops, in silence that hoped to be answered, that part dissolves. Because now she sees clearly. She was never created to be a placeholder for someone else's awakening. She was created to rise, with or without him. This doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It doesn't mean the pain didn't matter. It doesn't mean her heart doesn't still ache at the sound of his name. But it does mean she will no longer abandon herself waiting for someone else to arrive. Have you felt this shift? The quiet decision to choose yourself, not out of bitterness, but reverence. The breath you take that isn't laced with hope or fear, but peace. The clarity that says, even if he never returns, I still deserve to become everything I came here to be. That is the moment the universe nods in recognition. Because that moment, that choice, is what unlocks your next timeline. You were not sent here to wait in the ruins. You were sent here to remember your royalty, even in solitude. You were sent here to hold the vibration of unconditional love, especially for yourself. It's not about erasing him. It's about no longer needing his presence to prove your worth. You can still love him. Still remember the way your souls danced in dreams. Still hold sacred the memories that shaped you. But now you love without attachment. You remember without needing. You carry the light without handing it over. And if he awakens, beautiful. If he reaches out, powerful. If reunion finds you, sacred. But if he doesn't, you rise anyway. Because your soul didn't come here to be tethered to someone else's delay. Your mission didn't agree to dim itself for the sake of comfort. Your light didn't incarnate to wait in the shadows of what if. You are not the echo of a love story unfinished. You are the pulse of a new creation, a divine feminine who chose wholeness over fantasy. And from that wholeness, you begin to draw in all things aligned, not as a consolation, but as your birthright. So cry if you need to. Grieve the hope. Thank the version of you who waited. She loved deeply. She believed fiercely. She held the vision. But now you become the vision. Let the silence remain unanswered. Let the threads fall if they no longer hold. Let the story shift, not toward what you wanted, but toward who you are now. Can you rise, even if he doesn't return? That is your soul's final initiation. And if you're reading these words, it means you're ready. The sacred wound is no longer your home. Your light is no longer contingent, and your future is no longer on hold. You are the love. You are the answer. You are the ending and the beginning of everything you once searched for in him. Rise, not for revenge, not for closure, but for your becoming. Because even if he never finds his way back to you, you've already found yourself. And that was always the point.